Hello, Mr. Constitution. Douglas V. Gibbs here. Let's talk about the eviction moratorium because the courts just recently had a ruling regarding this. The Supreme Court voted 5-4 on Tuesday night to leave in place the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's plan on evictions imposed to combat the coronavirus pandemic and prevent homelessness. U.S. District Judge Dabney Friedrich said that the CDC lacked authority to impose the moratorium, but stayed her order to allow appeals to continue. At the Supreme Court, Chief Justice John G. Roberts Jr. joined fellow conservative Brett Kavanaugh. I don't know about those two being conservative, but anyway, and liberal justices Stephen G. Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan to keep the stay in place. Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Gorsuch and Barrett said that they would have lifted the stay, which would have struck down the moratorium. Now, listen to this very carefully. Kavanaugh, who voted to keep the moratorium in place, wrote that while he agreed the CDC had exceeded its authority, this was not the time to scuttle the ban on evictions. Now, go back to the district judge, Dabney Friedrich, admitted that CDC had exceeded its authority, but decided to keep the stay in place. And then Kavanaugh said the same, agreed CDC had exceeded its authority, but because, good intentions is higher than the law. Doesn't matter if they exceeded their authority. It was for good reason. It's okay that they broke the law and exceeded their authority because, they had the best of intentions. The CDC plans to end the moratorium in a few weeks anyway, July 31st. On June 24th, CDC Director Rochelle Walensky extended the evictions moratorium from June 30th until July 31st. Now, this moratorium has been in place for, a year. It goes all the way back to 2020. The White House is ramping up efforts aimed at preventing evictions, in particular by accelerating the dispersal of federal aid to millions of renters across the country. This is, by the way, I'm reading parts of a Washington Post article on narrow vote, Supreme Court leaves CDC ban on evictions in place. The moratorium deadline has been extended several times. The CDC's continued insistence that public health concerns necessitate that landlords continue to provide free housing for tenants who have received vaccines or passed up the chance to get them is sheer doublespeak, said the lawyer representing the landlords in this case. The government's lawyer, however, Acting Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar, told the court the CDC has the authority and its judgment should be trusted during the pandemic, especially as children go unvaccinated and new variants of the virus emerge. They believe they have the authority because they said they have the authority. Doesn't matter what the Constitution says. She also said that the pain felt by landlords is only temporary. Hey, man, you guys have lots of money. The pain's only temporary. You'll get over it. And that Congress has appropriated nearly $50 billion with rental assistance because, people can't pay their rent is suddenly your responsibility with your taxpayer money. Local governments may use the funds to pay up to 12 months of back rent and an additional 3 months of future rent for eligible tenants. The funds are payable directly to landlords. All right, so now, first of all, I'm going to go to another article in a minute, but first of all, where in the Constitution does it give the federal government the authority to be involved in our local economies, rent, or whether or not they can do this in the first? There is no authority. There's no authority given to the federal government. CDC has exceeded its authorities. The federal government has exceeded its authorities. Even the money they're coming up with to give to all these renters is unconstitutional. It's illegal what they're doing. But let's go beyond the legalities, because we're told by two judges now, Yeah, it's illegal. Yeah, they're exceeding their authorities, but it's needed. It's a good idea. We our hearts are, big with, feelings over this. Is it a good idea? So the Cato Institute, cato.org, writes this. The CDC eviction moratorium has it all: good intentions, urgency, poor design, a small group of potential winners, and a much, much larger group of direct intended and indirect unintended losers, including so many of the aforementioned winners. This COVID-19 has imposed severe financial and other burdens on many Americans. Rent was already a major source of this financial distress for millions of Americans before this hit. People were already not paying their rent, because sometimes people do that. Overall, 19.7% of census respondents indicate that they did not make last month's rent payment. This is at the beginning of the moratorium when this was written. This would imply that nearly 8.5 million households were already behind in their rental payments. The mere existence of a serious problem does not justify any and all federal government solutions thereto. Just because people don't hold their end of the bargain, just because people don't live up to their responsibilities, doesn't mean government must come in and bail them out. There must be consequences for people's actions. I get it. We have a big heart. Nobody saw this coming. Some people really got put in a situation. There should be some type of safety net. If the state wants to provide a safety net, they can. The federal government has no authority to. The CDC order bars any landlord from evicting any covered person from any residential property in any jurisdiction to which this order applies during the effective period of the order, which getting extended. A covered person is essentially anyone who expects to earn less than $99,000, $198,000 for couples, this within the year because of pandemic or whatever, and certifies via a form they provide their landlord that they're unable to pay their full rent and make a full housing payment due to substantial loss of household income. Oh man, I don't have enough money to make my rent. And I didn't set aside money for the emergency. Rainy day fund, what's that? Loss of compensable hours of work or wages, layoffs, or extraordinary out-of-pocket medical expenses, and would likely become homeless if evicted. Understand that the order is not a rent exemption. Beneficiary renters are still on the hook for any rent payments missed, plus any fees, penalties, or interest as a result of the failure to pay rent or other housing payment on a timely basis under the terms of any applicable contract. All right, now, if they're renters, they probably don't have a lot of disposable income, and now you're going to say, okay, you're going to pay it back and much more later. We can be able to do that. A regulation promulgated by the executive branch grants vast, almost limitless, the CDC clearly thinks, discretion to an executive branch bureaucrat, the CDC director, when acting on to contain any communicable disease. In other words, the president said, all right, do what you can. The CDC says, all right, I got all the power. I do whatever I want. I got broad powers. Now, let's see what the harm is. The order harms landlords by essentially forcing them to assume a renter's financial distress. Yeah, but Doug, they're rich. They have the business, so they can handle it. You sure? Moratoria has inflicted grave losses on many individual owners of rental properties. And that includes foreclosure, loss of property. If they lose the property and now there's nothing to rent, where do the renters go then? Landlords who face fines of up to $100,000 and a year of jail time for non-compliance. That's an incredible penalty. Tenants must merely sign an attestation, while landlords who want to remove non-paying tenants would have to prove tenants are lying. And here's the thing. It isn't just a bunch of rich landlords out there. Individual Americans who rent out a modest basement, grant house, or rental property, in each case depending on the rental income to pay down a mortgage on the property at issue. According to the Census Bureau, in fact, about 20 million of the country's 48 million rental units are owned and managed by individual investors, small investors like that who depend on the rent in order to survive. The CDC order creates potential losers who suffer months of lost income and have little or, if any, real legal recourse. But what about the landlords? Landlords respond to rent mandates in numerous ways. Okay, now, consequences. Whenever there's an action, there's a result. Whenever something happens, there's going to be a consequence. Landlords respond to rent mandates in numerous ways that actually end up hurting tenants, especially low-income tenants. The plan pushes landlords into converting rental units into non-controlled forms of accommodation, such as condos, discourage capital investment in new rental accommodation, thus lowering the overall supply of those units in the market relative to where it would have been. Further distort housing markets by generating a combination that is the wrong size or location for tenants, extensive wait list, black market behavior, and lead to the deterioration of the property quality so that its value more closely matches the controlled rental price. Other research shows that how landlords can use creative ways to recoup their losses by imposing new fees, such as charging for repairs or the use of amenities. So it doesn't get better for these people. You're not helping them. You're worsening the situation for all these renters you're trying to help, government. They also impose new and more stringent financial requirements on new tenants, like proof of income of a good job and higher deposit. So future tenants are also burned by this stupid moratorium. The increased stock of delinquent rentals reduces pressure on unemployed renters to find a new job, which in turn depresses employment. It also imposes a significant cost on rental property owners and servicers who still have to pay taxes and insurance and also face excess depreciation on delinquent rental properties. But it also hurts future renters and borrowers. Landlords on the hook for potentially significant property losses possibly will be raising other rents to cover those losses. Certain rental units falling into disrepair and hurting surrounding neighborhoods, evictions merely delayed into 2021 when the rent and fees bills come due, and of course, a lot of litigation. The CDC order is a perfect example of elite panic. They thought they knew better than the people on the ground how to adapt and fix things, so they stepped in with a legally radical and poorly considered mandate that not only imposed significant economic costs, but actually thwarted voluntary efforts by well-intentioned tenants and landlords, the people closest to the actual problems, to adjust their contracts and muddle through these difficult times. And on top of that, it's unconstitutional. They also went beyond their authority. But don't worry. All of this catastrophe, all of these consequences, it has good intention. So it's okay if we violate the Constitution and go beyond our authorities, right? United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, and God bless you. We'll see you next time right here on this video channel. Have a great one.